Jeremy King really is the king of restaurants in London. He has created many of London's most loved locations, and he has recently revealed his grandest project yet, Simpsons in the Strand. A project he had set his sights on over 20 years ago is now a reality. This magnificent building, with an incredible history of chess and fine dining, has been given a new sense of life. This is a new era in London and the greatest chapter of Jeremy King's legacy.
Restaurants are microcosms of life. We all want to be loved. We all want to be cared for. If we can give that impression, then we have a chance.
Jeremy King, it is a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. Happy to welcome you here.
We're here in Simpsons in the Strand, which is still in the process of being opened. This is a grand building that you have wanted since the year 2000, I understand.
Yes, when I was brought into Simpsons, there was something which spoke to me, and I still rather like the classic. Here, I really didn't believe it would ever be possible, but in 2000, the chance came. It was in the newspapers, and then for various reasons it fell away. And I tried again, particularly 2008, 2015, 2022, I put an offer in again. We weren't able to complete on the acquisition until June 25.
What kept you going for so many years, since the year 2000? What was it almost in your heart that you were like, I really want that building?
For me, this was truly unique, and it was the last grand dame. It really was the last opportunity. I was sustained because of its individuality, and it was a rare opportunity, and I just believed in it. And I always respond to buildings so much. I think one of the problems in the restaurant business is too often corporations, which particularly if they've got brands, try to impose a brand on a building. And I always think it's the building which talks to us, and you have to react. I love grand cafes because they offer flexibility. So in a room at any time, the customer makes of it what they want. It might be just a coffee, it might be champagne and oysters. Those are the sort of restaurants I like. They're more convivial. And here, with the number of rooms that it was offering, I could do a whole group of experiences.
How would you explain Simpsons in the Strand? Perhaps for someone that's never been here before, from the moment you walk in, it's an incredibly grand building, multiple restaurants, multiple bars, different ambience in each.
Simpsons ultimately is underpinned by chess. There was a massive growth in the interest in chess. In this building, you used to have world championship, people would bet on them. You'd have runners taking results across town. It's almost like the Premier League or something. In our, what we call the assembly room, which is our event space, we will start to do Sunday night events. So grandmasters coming in, doing simultaneous chess, doing blindfolded chess.
Gosh, I'm tempted to learn chess now.
Yeah.
I love how you have speckled throughout the building so many elegant references to chess everywhere. It's almost like spot the chess. Every time I see something on the carpet, oh, I found another one. Yeah. It must have been quite intentional in the redesign.
Very much so. The borders of the carpet, down in the grand divan, you'll see the chess pieces on top of the lights. The other attractions of the building is that it's purpose-built as a restaurant. And it very rarely happens. And there are advantages. During the games of chess, what originated was probably one of the most famous aspects of Simpsons, which is the beef trolley. For 2 years, when it became known that I was doing Simpsons, every service in the other restaurants, I would be asked, when Simpsons opening, will you keep the trolleys? And the reason the trolleys came into being is because when people were playing chess, it was difficult for them to eat. So they'd bring the trolleys round and cut off a little bit of beef, and then so they could sustain themselves.
I mean, that is a big invention to originate from Simpsons. Yeah. That's gone global, hasn't it?
The roast beef and off a trolley, it was entirely from Simpsons. And now it's really surprising because, of course, the British adopted roast beef as the standard Sunday lunch fare. That's the family meal, etc. I think last week we did 90 ribs of beef. That's an awful lot of beef.
I was very lucky to have it here yesterday. Firstly, the theatre of the trolley coming to the table is wonderful, and the chefs coming to carve it, but it is incredibly delicious. You do it very, very well.
Thank you. I'm glad, because it was fundamental to the success of Simpsons, because everybody wanted to come and try the beef. It's the main seller at the moment from what is quite a large menu. My other interest, and particular interest, is theatre. And as we sit in this room, one of the features is the portraits. One of my techniques with restaurants to invent stories. So the story of the portraits is that I imagine it's 1904 when this opened, and that the proprietors would have started commissioning portraits of playwrights who had plays on in the West End. So looking around here, when George Bernard Shaw, of course, went on to great things. Cecily Hamilton, Granville Barker. One of my favorites is actually straight ahead of me, which is a lady called Christabel Marshall, who is a one-hit wonder, and she wrote a play about suffragettes, emancipation of women. So I was quite keen on that. So I felt much better.
Could you take us through each of the rooms?
Certainly.
So, and I think it's lovely to explain to people this is such an incredibly large site, in the sense of there's a number of restaurants, a number of bars, each of them equally grand and as fascinating in the atmospheres that each set up. So if you start with perhaps on the ground floor.
You enter the Grand Divan, which is probably the most famous restaurant. And there's these famous settles, high-backed benches running down one side, forming what was actually called, latterly discovered, boxes. These were always the coveted. I mean, you're slightly more discreet in there and so on.
Was the layout always the same?
The layout was all fairly large tables of 2, which could be made into 4s, just spread out. It seemed to suit people because the men could push the tables together and so on.
Nice.
But we've done in a different ways, because one of the things I think important in a restaurant is corners, certain amount of intimacy, privacy. At one end of the room is somewhat intriguing painting, which was done by a Danishman called Rosencrantz. It was commissioned in 1904, and it's kind of appropriate. Rosencrantz became famous for doing nursery rhyme illustrations, and it depicts the famous English nursery rhyme, sing a song of sixpence, a pocket full of rye, 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie. When the pie was opened, the birds began to sing, "Isn't that a dainty dish to set before a king," which is the legend across the bottom of it. Otherwise, it's wood paneled, high ceilings.
Ceiling's incredible, incredibly grand.
And mostly what I had to do with that is restore and bring it back. We changed quite a lot, but always my intention was that people would walk through the door and say, "Good, you haven't changed a thing." I have investors and a bank manager who would attest to the fact that we have changed a lot. And then that leads to, you can either go downstairs, and there was a room, when we got it, it was actually a storeroom. And this I've made into a bar celebrating Dame Nellie Melba, fellow Australian.
Yes, thank you so much.
Great,
yes.
great opera singer. Gave her name to Melba Toast, or indeed Peach Melba. And actually the name I hadn't realized for a long time is that her name had emanated from the fact that she came from Melbourne.
Oh, as do I. Yes.
So she was Melba from Melbourne. And she used to sing at the Opera House, lived at the Savoy.
The design down there is spectacular. It was a very special space, I think, in London, and with a 3 a.m. license.
3 a.m. license, and is very much directed at the theatre profession and theatre goers.
I love the prints that you've just put up with all the references to the theatre performances.
Yes.
And the secret staircase.
But all those photographs were taken pretty much within 200 yards of here.
Really?
At the Vaudeville, the Savoy, and so on. And there's a lot of Coward, Noel Coward, Richard Harris, Laurence Olivier, people like that. It gives somebody to the theatre profession so that they have almost an unofficial clubhouse, which is reasonably priced.
But it also gives rise to the wonderful full night out for guests at the theatre, to perhaps go to theatre, come here for something to eat downstairs, and then continue on.
We may have to make it an unofficial club. The next thing which catches your eye is perhaps as you're walking past the stairwell again, there's a Edwardian style painting of the Savoy Theatre with an imaginary group of people, Winston Churchill, Nellie Melba, Lily Langtry, D'Oyly Carte, all sitting there watching the Mikado.
The assembly room to walk into is like walking into a palace. It's hard to describe just how incredibly grand it is. It really feels like, often refer to it as perhaps a private dining room. You walk in and you're really in awe walking in. Wow, this is incredible what I've just walked into.
The assembly room was known as the ladies' restaurant. And that made me a bit uncomfortable, that women were in their restaurant, men were in their restaurant. And it got worse because if you look at the grand divan downstairs, there's a clock above the door, above the entrance, and it stopped at 1:02. And what they used to tell me was that, yes, it stopped in 1984, the moment the first woman crossed the threshold of the restaurant. This is making me very uncomfortable. And we've got to expunge all notice of this, otherwise we're going to have demonstrations outside. But then I went to speak to the archivist at the Savoy, and she said, no, don't worry about that at all. That was intentional. It weren't really banned. They didn't want to be with the men. There they were, nicely dressed in their crinoline or whatever. They didn't want to join a big group of loud, smelly, cigar-smoking, drunken men. They wanted to get away from the men. And I started to feel
I think they had the nicest room as well. The one
It's a beautiful, and it's an elegant room. And then your eyes caught by the bar, Simpson's bar, which is a destination bar, slightly more Art Deco. And then turn to the left, you enter into Romano's.
There we are now.
Which naturally people assume is an Italian restaurant because of the name, but in fact it derived its name from probably the greatest restaurant in this part of the town, late 19th century. But this is quite a contrast as a room because it's lighter. It was a white box when we got it.
Really, was it?
So
also all this detail you've added.
Well, not all of the detail, but a lot of the detail was obscured. So we've revealed more than added.
I feel very special to be in this room today because it's not actually open yet to the public. So it's very special to be here. Having seen it a couple of weeks ago without any of the furniture in it, it looks like it's ready to go now.
It had its first quasi run out on Sunday night. There was Ian McKellen, there was Derek Jacobi, Anne Reid, all these sort of people, and much, much, much more. One of the big challenging moments of any restaurant is the acoustics, because they can be the make or break of any restaurant. Yes. And actually I found the acoustics work very well.
What do you want people to feel when they come to Simpsons in the Strand? So you'd wanted it for so many years, and I believe that you would think, I, as Jeremy King, can add something to this and a feeling to this that perhaps isn't already there. It's already grand, it's already wonderful and iconic.
It's an interesting question. I never want people to be daunted by the surroundings. I want them to come in. We keep the doors open at the grand divan downstairs so that you have that moment of opening the door and the first time we'll say, wow, I hadn't expected that. And it is such an unusual room. You don't find rooms like it. When I'm asked what are the most important ingredients in a restaurant, they expect me to talk about the room, the chef, the location, whatever. I always say heart and soul. And that room has more heart and soul than almost anywhere I've been involved with. But if you look at into human emotions, restaurants are also microcosms of life. I want people, having been surprised by the interior, to be embraced by the interior, to feel that they belong. I think we all need to feel secure, to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel heard. And I think we're forgetting that in society nowadays. And society generally has become so transactional to the detriment of enjoyment. And I make a big thing with the staff is that you must not look at people coming through the door as a potential source of income. You have to see them as an opportunity to give somebody a good time. And if they have a good time, then you'll make money. A lot of people moan that I don't have a dress code. And I said, no, I have a hatred of dress code. I guess 85% of all the serious problems I've had in a restaurant have been caused by rowdy men wearing suits and ties. So I think, well, where does dress code get you? I wouldn't mind a behavior code, not a dress code.
It was amazing to see yesterday in your early days of the restaurant being open. But, I was there from 12 to 2, it's totally packed sitting next to Stephen Fry, extra pleased. And at 2 p.m. you had a whole nother setting coming in of full. So already in the early days, the demand for that. I can only imagine when the full space is open.
I don't think I've had any restaurant have such a wonderful response, and people have been so excited.
I think it's a lovely thing that you know, as a true restaurateur, still walk the floor of all of your restaurants each day. And when you walk into any of your restaurants, on the floor of the restaurants, and it's packed and there's people everywhere and there's so much happening, where are your eyes looking and what are you focused on each time?
The first thing I do, rather than focusing my eyes, I tune my ear, because you can normally tell. Adrian Gill actually wrote about the hum of a successful restaurant. A proper restaurateur can walk in and think it's going well or it's going badly.
That's so
And
interesting.
it's amazing how often I walk into a room over the years and I look around and I'll say to the desk, "Can you check if it's a full moon?"
Really?
Yeah, because it really makes a difference in a restaurant. It's crazy. Lunatics.
Lunatics on the loop.
Lunatics
Yeah.
got their name from, in truth, everybody's sort of complicit in not talking about it, but the ambulance service, police, hospitals, firefighters are all alert to full moons.
Interesting.
It's really, really fascinating.
And the other thing I'm fascinated by and have so much respect for is the family of staff that you continue to have that follow you and join you on any venture that you do or just want to work with you. And I'm so curious, how would you describe the team of staff you have with you and what you look for when you're recruiting new staff?
What I look for is very simple, is attitude. And Danny Meyer, the famous restaurateur in New York, always would say, "I can teach people how to open a bottle of wine. I can't teach attitude." Very much about that. There I was telling the story before we opened of the first year at the Caprice. And if at the end of that first year, I had gone to all the customers and said, "Who's our best waiter?" I'm sure they would all have said Dinsey. And Dinsey was from the Caribbean, had the best smile in the world. The customers loved him because his smile, he made people feel loved. He made mistakes, etc., but nobody really cared. If I'd gone to the managers and the chefs and said, "Who's the worst waiter we've got?" they unanimously would have said Dinsey.
Yeah.
And it's an important hospitality
I get
lesson.
that, yeah.
And one of my first rules of hospitality is that the greater the popularity of the member of staff with the customers, the bigger the pain in the arse they probably are for the management. And I think we have to understand that is people who are allowed to make people feel good, thrive. After I left Corbin & King, I got quite a few chefs and asking me, "Can we come and join you?" And it was a particularly good one who I couldn't accommodate. I couldn't anticipate accommodating because I'll help you find a job. That's the sort of thing I would always do. Each of my staff only has one life and potentially one career, and therefore is my responsibility is to make sure that they're looked after as I would want my children looked after, and that I'm not selfish and think, "Oh, I'm going to hold on to them because they're too useful." And this chef, I said, "How can I help you? What do you want?" And he said, "I want to work for somebody who knows my name." And what was interesting was when we were starting to move into the building, take possession, and there were problems with it, we assembled all the managers, and there were actually a lot of them. There were about 30 or so. Now, I had no idea how many people were in there, and I saw a few people I knew at the table. And then I turned the corner. I felt very emotional because here was this table of 30, and at least 25 of them I'd worked with before. And there's no greater gratification than that they wanted to come back.
If you were to give a staff briefing to your staff, what would you say are the core principles that you would like them to deliver in service to the customers?
I talked to them about communication and smiling. You possess the greatest weapon ever, and a lot of you don't use it, which is the smile. But also the communication is that in service their mind will be full of all the things they have to do, but they're not communicating. And lack of communication is the root to conflict. And the important thing is, somebody said to me not that long ago, very succinctly, when we go to a restaurant, we'll always return to a restaurant as long as the food is good enough, if the service is great and friendly. And it doesn't matter how good the food is, we won't return to the restaurant where the service is stuck up or supercilious or whatever. We all want to be loved. We all want to be cared for. And if we can give that impression, then we have a chance.
The hospitality industry, and also having grown up in it, I'm fully aware that it can be a very hectic, manic industry. But you really strike me as someone that is continually so calm and composed in an industry that can be quite stressful. You've seen a lot in your time. How do you remain so composed?
I work on the basis, never get upset about something which is happening now if you're going to forget about it tomorrow or in a week or in a month.
Oh, really?
And if you look back on your own life, you'll probably find that things which at the time you thought were catastrophic in the highest degree, actually you've forgotten about them. So why not hasten the process of forgetting by not getting upset? When you get upset is when you do things which means you won't forget. It's a hard discipline. The other thing I do a great deal is in adversity, I look for the positives. So even if something goes really wrong, I think my natural defense is, how might that benefit me? Going back to how did I sustain my enthusiasm? Actually, I could tell another story. It would mean me swearing in quotation.
That's perfectly fine.
Is that all right?
I'm Australian. We're very much adapt to that.
Right. Going through fundraising and problems and delays and all sorts of things which are hard to resolve. And I hadn't completely realized it, but I was starting to flag a bit. And this particular morning, I had a friend coming in, David Elton, who's opened hotel chains and all sorts of things, a wonderful guy, and then followed by a potential investor. And he wanted to see, and I took him around. It was looking pretty rough. And I explained what I was planning, and he kept quite quiet. And we got back downstairs, and he was still a bit quiet. And I thought, he didn't like it. He thinks I'm mad. And he's looking around. He said, Jeremy, I thought, oh God. He said, this is fucking fantastic. Unbelievable. And I thought, yeah, you're right. It really is. And it just caught me at the right moment. And the next investor came along. I approached the whole thing with a different attitude. Like, that poor guy had no alternative but to invest. I was ever grateful to him for seeing it through fresh eyes.
On a project as big as this, do you still get nervous? So, I mean, it's such a huge, you must have had so many sleepless nights on the journey, but then even now in these weeks, it's a lot, isn't it?
I feel it's my job to be calm.
I'm so curious on lighting, and I've read that lighting in a Jeremy King restaurant is pivotal to everything. What was your approach here?
I still think we've got a way to go. Actually, the best lesson I had on lighting was from Peter Langen, who was a great restaurateur. He was a completely debauched and incorrigible individual.
You did touch on that in your book, which I found quite entertaining. Didn't hold back.
There's certainly no life lessons from him, but restaurateur lessons are great. He said the secret of great lighting is shadow. It's the contrast and drama of lighting which is important. It's very difficult to achieve in the same way because of all the advances in lighting. It started with low voltage, LED lighting. It's very difficult to control in the same way. It's difficult to get the focus onto a table. I spend a lot of time. If you ask me what's the most important thing in a restaurant, I would say lighting. If you say what's the biggest challenge for you in a restaurant, I would say lighting. Poor lighting designer. They sort of like it because they enjoy the result. They don't always enjoy the process with me.
I actually met your lighting designers yesterday when I was looking around, and I had a lovely chat. They showed me some of the lamps about the warmth.
Yeah, warmth of it.
Warmth is key. But I think it's like, I would say, in Nellie's downstairs, I think that lighting is just sensational. Like the whole fit out is incredible. The lighting features above are so beautifully done. But then, it's different elements. Here you've got the wonderful sunlight coming through. So there's obviously the factor of that. And then again, I'm curious from like day to night, how you approach it. Like what time of day do you say, okay, it's time to dim the lights? It's a constant moving feast.
It's constant. And one of the things I like to do with lighting, Tim understands, is to give me options.
As an icon in the restaurant industry, there are obviously so many people wanting to start new restaurants. And as you know, there's a lot of people struggling in the restaurant industry with the different challenges of taxes and things here. Firstly, what advice would you give to someone setting up a restaurant?
I'd say trust your intuition, trust your instinct. Don't be told what to do by anybody. Avoid doing what you feel you should do in favor of what you want to do, because in my life, pretty much everything I regret has been something I did because I felt I should. And it's a big difference in life. You don't regret the wants. They go wrong, but you don't really think, yeah, I wanted to do it.
But it is interesting, I think, with intuition, as you say, even on the small example of the lighting, you know what it should be. Like it is your gut feeling, isn't it? And it is staying true to that, which is almost the constant challenge, because it can weigh you down as well when everyone's also telling you.
In society now, which is getting very homogenized, everything has to be done with statistical proof of concept. We're not allowed to say, I think this would work. And that's what a restaurateur has to do. And too many restaurateurs, who are actually probably restaurant owners, create restaurants that they think people want to go to. I believe a restaurateur should open a restaurant that they want to go to and put their passion into it and constantly try to improve it. And that's the other thing people do, is they open a restaurant and think their job's done. For me, it's at least 10 years of improving, and then there's a whole new round of improving. As in, do I change the seating? Do I change the lighting? And the advances. And the other piece of advice I'd always give is really about keeping control. When Chris and I originally had Corbin & King, well, Caprice Holdings, Caprice, IB, Sheikas, and then Corbin & King. Caprice Holdings, we had 100% control, and it makes all the difference. And we made decisions, changed systems and changed appearances that if we'd had investors, we would never have been able to do, because we were new to it. Now I'm very fortunate that my investors are very supportive and believe in me, and that luckily enough, I have enough track record that I can work really well with them. But for somebody young, I always say keep control. Even if it's only 51%, keep control. If that means keeping it small, do, because what happens is they have a good idea, they're very talented, they've been managers or chefs at different places. People persuade them to do a restaurant, they get the backers, and then the backer said, let's do something bigger. You're better off with 30% of something big than 55% of something small. You're not, because you can be a true restaurateur.
Yes.
And that difference, of course, as we've established, is the restaurateur does it from the floor, the restaurant owner does it from the boardroom, the different shows.
Over your incredibly long journey in this, reading your book, it was so wonderful to learn all the different chapters, from starting at a kiosk in the beach, and then all the different restaurants and experiences and partnership with Chris, and now doing this huge new project here. You've faced a lot of challenges over the years, yet you've come back bigger than ever. What is the key to continuing on and overcoming all these challenges that you would say to people?
I'm fortunate. I just have an inherent belief that I can, if I think, I can overcome problems. And there's a couple of stories in the book of people lateral thinking. And I think we're very fixed in our ways. A lot of our thinking is sequential. And actually, if we step back, we can find a way through. I'm slightly stubborn. I like to believe. There's a certain amount of fear. And I suppose it's probably the same phenomenon that women experience after childbirth. Why on earth would anybody go back and have another child? But luckily there's childbirth amnesia and there's restaurant opening amnesia as well.
You seem to be surviving this one quite well. There's so many wonderful stories about Simpsons in the Strand, about the different eras and the different legacies from each. What would you like your legacy at Simpsons in the Strand to be in years to come?
I suppose a really gratifying legacy is that I might have been known as the person who saved Simpsons. I know how important that was to so many people, because people are coming in with tears in their eyes because it's been such a big thing for their families over the years. And I thought people would have forgotten that. I thought that was a lost generation. But they saw it close and they hoped it would open, and they saw things were opening in 2022, if not before. And they kept looking and watching, and they assumed it was never going to come back. The extraordinary gratitude, and I would say to people, not you who should be thanking me, I'm thanking you for coming in. They said, no, because this is our part of our life, and we thought we'd lost it. So I suppose that, in a way, is the legacy.
Yes, and it seems you entered the stage at the right time at Simpsons.
Yeah.
Because it's just when it needed the saving.
The Simpsons seems to, for many people, to be a return to stability.
Yes, but also with a breath of fresh air as well.
Yeah, it makes it much more interesting for me.
A wonderful Jeremy King. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.